Picture this: two of the most powerful female voices in rock music standing at opposite ends of the spectrum. Joni Mitchell, the poetic folk goddess known for her intricate lyrics and deep introspection. Grace Slick, the wild rock and roll queen, with a voice like a battle cry and a rebellious spirit that set stages on fire. For decades, their paths never seemed to cross in an open conflict. Until now. Recently, Joni finally spoke out about what she really thought of Grace, and fans were left stunned. The folk legend didn't hold back, exposing long-held tensions between the two icons.
Kantner wrote that song, but he knows. His life is like that. The other fellow you saw in the band, Pete Sears, his life is like that.
Behind the scenes, there had always been whispers of their quiet competition. But now the truth was out. Joni painted a picture of Grace as reckless, unpredictable, and at times outright offensive. The revelation reopened old wounds and reignited a conversation about Grace's troubled legacy, one riddled with feuds, scandals, and self-destructive choices that left a trail of controversy in her wake. Long before the tension with Joni, Grace had another unspoken rivalry, with none other than Janis Joplin. The two frontwomen dominated the 1960 rock scene, but their styles and backgrounds couldn't have been more different. Grace came from an upper-class family, her rebellion more of a choice than a necessity. Janis, on the other hand, carried the weight of an outsider, using her music as an escape from pain. The two women had a complicated dynamic. They respected each other, but deep down there was friction. Janis saw Grace as someone who didn't have to fight as hard, while Grace viewed Janis as unpredictable and self-destructive. They often ended up in the same social circles, but there was always an underlying tension. It wasn't a war, but it was certainly a competition. If Grace had one true male counterpart in rock, it was Jim Morrison. Both were fearless, both were volatile, and both had a taste for pushing the boundaries of excess. Their encounters were legendary, fueled by alcohol, ego, and mutual attraction. But behind the wild parties and psychedelic haze, their relationship was anything but romantic. It was a ticking time bomb. Jim was notorious for his self-destructive tendencies, and Grace wasn't one to be overshadowed. They clashed in ways that were both intoxicating and terrifying. Jim, drunk and out of control, would provoke Grace, and she'd fire back just as hard. It was a relationship built on competition rather than affection, each trying to outdo the other in recklessness. In the end, Morrison spiraled deeper into his own demons, while Grace, though walking the same dangerous path, managed to survive. But their encounters left scars, both on their reputations and on their own sense of control.
It's terrible! See, you're supposed to have really good feelings, like you get wise and everything, and know I'm really enjoying it now, and I hate it.
While Grace's public feuds were legendary, some of her most intense conflicts happened within her own band. Marty, a founding member of Jefferson Airplane, was one of the first to feel the full force of Grace's presence. When she joined the band in 1966, she quickly took center stage. Her voice and persona became the defining elements of the group, and Marty, who had once been its leader, found himself pushed aside. The friction between them grew with every tour and every album. Marty resented the way Grace overshadowed his contributions, and their clashes became personal. He saw her as disruptive, unpredictable, and, at times, destructive to the band's unity. She, in turn, viewed him as rigid and unwilling to evolve. It was a battle of old guard versus new energy. And eventually, Marty had enough. He walked away from Jefferson Airplane, citing the toxic atmosphere as one of the reasons for his departure. Grace's relationship with Paul Kantner, her bandmate and the father of her child, was a storm in itself. They were partners in music, in rebellion, and in life, but their relationship was far from perfect. Paul was one of the few people who could handle Grace's sharp tongue and wild nature, but even he had his limits. Their relationship was filled with heated arguments and dramatic reconciliations. Passion and conflict intertwined, creating a volatile dynamic that was impossible to sustain. They could be deeply in love one moment and locked in a screaming match the next. The intensity of their connection was undeniable, but so were the cracks forming beneath it. Their fights became legendary among friends and bandmates, often fueled by alcohol and the pressures of life on the road. They had a daughter together, China Kantner, but even that wasn't enough to keep them together. Parenthood brought a new dimension to their bond, but it also magnified their differences. Grace, known for her unpredictable nature, struggled with the stability that family life required, while Paul, though equally committed to the rock and roll lifestyle, longed for a sense of order that was impossible with Grace's spiraling behavior. The demands of fame, coupled with Grace's increasingly reckless behavior, eventually drove them apart. Late-night fights, bitter accusations, and moments of sheer exhaustion took their toll. Paul tried to be her anchor, but Grace was a force of nature that refused to be tethered. She self-sabotaged in ways that made reconciliation impossible, pushing him away with her destructive tendencies. As their love unraveled, so did their ability to work together without tension poisoning their music. Grace later admitted that Paul was one of the few people who ever truly understood her, but by the time they realized it, it was already too late. Their relationship, once a rebellious and passionate partnership, had burned too brightly for too long, leaving only ashes in its wake. The pain lingered long after their split, a testament to a love that was as chaotic as it was unforgettable. One of the most infamous scandals in Grace's career happened in 1978, when Jefferson Starship, her reincarnation of Jefferson Airplane, toured Germany. What was supposed to be another electrifying performance turned into an absolute nightmare. Grace, heavily intoxicated, stumbled onto the stage, her words slurred, her demeanor erratic. At first, the audience thought it was part of the act, but soon it became clear this was not a performance. This was a meltdown unfolding in real time. As she swayed unsteadily, she began hurling offensive remarks at the German crowd, her insults growing increasingly inappropriate and shocking. The tension in the room thickened, but the breaking point came when she, in a drunken haze, began making Nazi salutes, an unforgivable act that sent gasps rippling through the audience. Some people booed, others stood in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Grace had gone too far, and there was no coming back from it. Backstage, her bandmates were horrified. They had seen Grace drink before, they had even witnessed her outbursts, but this was something else entirely. It was a moment of self-destruction so complete that no one knew how to react. The show was abruptly cut short, and as the band stormed off stage, an uncomfortable silence hung in the air, one that spoke louder than any words could. The fallout was immediate. Grace was promptly fired from Jefferson Starship, marking one of the most humiliating exits in rock history. The band had tolerated a lot from her over the years, but this was the final straw. The scandal spread like wildfire. Headlines condemned her, fans turned against her, and for the first time in her career, even the rebellious rock scene had no excuse for her behavior. Though she later expressed regret for her actions, the damage was done. Her reputation took a massive hit, and it was clear that her battles with alcohol and self-destruction had reached a breaking point. The woman who once commanded the stage with fearless confidence had now become a cautionary tale of rock excess gone too far. Grace's troubles weren't limited to music. Throughout her life, she struggled with addiction, leading to numerous brushes with the law. She was arrested multiple times, including an incident in 1994 when she pointed a gun at a police officer in her home, drunk and defiant. Her drinking had spiraled out of control, leading to years of reckless decisions, public meltdowns, and self-inflicted damage. Her personal relationships also crumbled under the weight of her erratic behavior. She attracted people with her charisma, only to drive them away with unpredictable mood swings and volatile outbursts. Even those who deeply cared for her, like Paul Kantner, eventually found themselves unable to endure the storm that followed her. Her daughter, China Kantner, grew up witnessing her mother's downward spiral, leaving their relationship fractured. Despite her immense talent, Grace's demons often took center stage, overshadowing her legacy. She lived by her own rules, but it came at a price. Broken friendships, failed relationships, and a reputation that often overshadowed her musical genius. She burned bright, but in doing so left a trail of destruction in her wake. Despite the scandals, the feuds, and the self-inflicted destruction, Grace Slick remains one of the most iconic figures in rock history. She was fearless, unpredictable, and, at times, completely unhinged. But she was also a trailblazer. Her voice defined a generation, and her rebellious spirit made her unforgettable. Joni's harsh words may have reopened old wounds, but the truth is Grace's story was always one of conflict. Against the world, against her bandmates, and most of all, against herself. Love her or hate her, one thing is undeniable: there will never be another Grace Slick.